Clerk, call roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy C. Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Marty Van Ravensway, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3. J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invitation today will be delivered by our own Dave Barrett, chaplain of the Sheriff's Department. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledge.
Let us pray. O God of peace, our hearts are continually saddened by the acts of terror and war that plague us. I pray especially today for those soldiers and families that have been touched by the tragedy at Fort Hood. Be with them to comfort them and hold them to heal them. Today I pray that we might have peace in our world. But there can be no world peace without peace in our nations. I pray for peace in our nations, but there can be none without peace in our communities. I pray for peace in our communities, but there can be none without peace between neighbors. I pray for peace between neighbors, but there can be none without peace in the home. I pray for peace in the home, but there can be none without peace in the heart. Give us peace in our hearts this day, in all we do and say. And when the fighting and tragedy of this world overwhelm us, remind us that peace begins with each of us individually. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Good day. And I would like for us to close court today in honor and memory of those folks who were going to Mr. Mangus.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have several announcements for the court this morning. The first deals with the administrator section. Item 9A5. This concerns a construction contract with the City of North Richland Hills. We're going to ask that we hold that for a week. Also would like to remind the court that we do have court in the morning at 9 o'clock for the sole purpose of canvassing the election returns for the November 3rd election. And then finally, members of the court, just to note, if you will check your mics to make sure that they're turned on. Thank you.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of November the 3rd.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Under proclamations, we have a proclamation for Home Health Care and Hospice Month, and that is for ratification. I'll move its approval at this time.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
When will that be presented?
You know, it's a good question. And I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to get back with you on that.
All right.
Somebody soon.
Okay.
One other thing, from time to time we joke up here about or give each other a hard time about various football teams and football games. This week we have a kind of a home team deal. TCU is rated number 4. We were going to come up here today. I was going to come up here today and encourage everybody to go to the game, but they sold out yesterday. So you can go and stand up out there, I guess, if you'd like to do that. But it's great. They're ranked number 4, ahead of both Arkansas and LSU, slightly behind Texas. But it's going to be I think it's going to be a great weekend, and certainly that school and that team deserve to be recognized and deserve to have a great turnout. They're going to have ESPN's going to have their game day out there, so it's going to be quite an event, and I think it's exciting. And I hope they do great this weekend, and I think if they do, they'll find themselves in the BCS, and that's super. So
Go Frogs.
go Frogs. Go Frogs. You have before you the consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. This time we have a public hearing. Slam.
Thank you. I'm here today to request that Commissioners Court have a public hearing to consider the placement of stop signs at two locations in Ashford Park subdivision. The first location is the north and southbound lanes of Longstone at Beeley. The second location is Wickham at 1187. Both are within Ashford Park subdivision in Precinct 1.
This is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak to this matter. None appearing, then I will close the public hearing and ask for any actions that you might want to take at this time.
Move approval of the placement of various stop signs in the Ashford Park subdivision, Precinct 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manius?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have several items this morning, but before we get into our section, I would just like to recognize Councilman Danny Scarth from the City of Fort Worth this year. And we have two items that affect his council district, and the first one we're going to talk about this morning is item 1. Ms. McMillan is here to address the court at this time. This concerns a TIF. It's the Woodhaven TIF. Ms. McMillan.
Judge, Commissioners, we're asking you today to consider approval of the participation agreement providing for county's participation in the City of Fort Worth Tax Increment Financing Reinvestment Zone number 13, which is the Woodhaven TIF. This 1,100-acre TIF is expected to fund a maximum of $13.5 million in infrastructure projects, including corridor improvements, gateway enhancements, and public infrastructure and demolition associated with renovation and redevelopment of commercial sites in the Woodhaven zone. The public financing for these projects is expected to spur revitalization efforts and promote an estimated $89 million in taxable value growth over the 20-year life of the TIF. The agreement you have before you provides for the county participation in this TIF at 80% of its incremental property tax revenues generated within the zone, up to a maximum contribution of $2,787,885. So the county would participate up to a maximum of 20 years or until that cap is reached. The taxing entities already participating or expected to participate in this TIF district are Fort Worth, the Tarrant Regional Water District, the county, Tarrant County Hospital District, and Tarrant County College District. We're now asking you to consider approval of the attached resolution and the participation agreement for the county's participation in TIF number 13.
Move approval of both the resolution and the participation agreement.
Could I ask a question, please? I don't know that you would have the answer for it, but do you know what the dollar amount is that's anticipated to come from the hospital district?
I don't, but it will be slightly less than ours, so it's probably a little bit less than $2 million. If they would cap also.
They would cap.
And just knowing that the differences in our tax rates, I would estimate it would be just slightly under $2 million.
And what amount of tax to the requester would that be? Percentage?
It will be about $8 million that will go to the TIF itself, and $2 million to be from us. That's an 80-20 split.
I really want to make the statement that while I am supportive of this endeavor, we need to be very cautious of removing anything further from the hospital district. Yet we get a return in the future, and we have such a current demand for services now that taking anything away from the hospital district is counterproductive to us as the county, because they have current needs that we still have to take care of.
And this still has to go before the hospital district board, so I just know what they're being
That's
requested.
before us.
Now, the hospital board will take action on this individually, correct?
Correct.
On the abatements, we act on their behalf.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
Is there a second to
We need
motion?
a second.
so
Yeah, we need a second.
make this legal.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Please vote. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the court, a week ago to item number 2, we're requesting that the court accept a grant award from the Supreme Court of Texas, the Permanent Judicial Commission for Children, Youth, and Families Court Improvement Program for the development of the Child Protective Case enhancements to the JCMS.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I heard that. Ms. Glenn?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We only have 2 items for the court this morning. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file a personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The second item, we're asking the court to approve a waiver of terminal benefits for the Resource Connection. Ms. Ketchum lost her secretary, not lost, but her secretary retired in mid-September. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to startle everybody. She's fine. She's retired. She's retiring comfortably. She left with 400 vacation hours, and Ms. Ketchum is requesting a waiver effective November 16th. With salary savings, we're looking at a fiscal impact to the Resource Connection Fund of a little bit more than $850.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Honor, Commissioners. We're requesting approval of changes to the agreements with the Texas Conference of Urban Counties for the Integrated Justice Program for fiscal year 2010. As a result from these changes, there is expected to be an $800,000 distribution through the CUC to participating counties as a part of our Tech Share Cost Recovery Plan that we've been working on all these years.
Seems to be working as we hope it is.
Yes.
So I will move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Brewer? Good morning.
Morning.
Public Health has one item for your approval this morning. This is to submit a grant application to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the Communities Putting Prevention to Work initiative, and this is an American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding source.
What do we propose to do under the grant program?
This is a very prescriptive RFP. Their CDC is using data and evidence-based practice that they already have, and they're looking for assurance from the community that you can carry this evidence-based practice out in your community with your partners. So the emphasis is on gathering the partners together, getting their support and interest, and then looking at the collection of evidence-based practice around nutrition and physical activity in order to prevent obesity. So that's the whole emphasis of the grant. It does include a required youth behavior risk factor surveillance survey, a modified version, which is only the nutrition and the physical activity part, to be conducted in as many high schools in the county as possible. And we're in the process of, we've already contacted all of the ISD superintendents. We're in the process of getting their support and their sign-on to do that. So a large amount of the money would be to administer and evaluate that survey twice. It's a 2-year program, and the CDC really wants to see results quickly. So another part of the money will go towards evaluation, and we're hoping our School of Public Health partner at UNT will help us with that. And then another pot of money will go to the policy level campaign around policies to promote good nutrition and physical activity. So we will be involving our elected officials at the local, state, and national level, as well as our other community partners in that policy effort.
Are we working with Cook's Hospital? Because I know they've got a big initiative on
Yes.
obesity, as does, I think, United Way may also.
Yes, absolutely. The grant requires that you have a leadership team to get started with, and both of those are partners in that leadership team.
Now, with this leadership team, is it restricted to those members that are listed here for the duration, or will there be additional partners coming on?
There will be a larger group. When we get the funding, there will be a larger group, a community advisory council. And we can have as many people in that, and we have greater flexibility as to who the partners are. Obviously, we'll be looking for partners that can help to promote the focus of the grant, but absolutely, we can expand it. Yeah.
You said that the grant is prescriptive, highly prescriptive, I
Yes.
believe you said, based on evidence-based practices. You mentioned a survey, you mentioned evaluation, and you mentioned policy formation.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in that do I hear hands-on programs to get kids to eat right or exercise properly. How do we do that? Is there something in those evidence-based practices that gives a roadmap for how they want to see that done?
That's an excellent question. What they don't want to have happen is funding for like one or two programs that only reach, say, 30 people at once. They really are looking for what policy can be put in place at the local or state level that will impact all children and adults. And this does go across the age spectrum. So they're really looking at policies such as what's in a vending machine, healthy foods in a vending machine, or no vending machine at all, that type of thing. So really looking at implementing programs that impact everybody across the board.
So this is really to set up a community infrastructure and planning process to get across-the-board improvements in exercise and nutrition.
Yes. It could impact zoning in the future in terms of looking at what are the zoning regulations in a community and how could you just tweak them a little bit to be more friendly to physical activity. Walking, bicycling.
Additional park space?
Yes. And again, the nice thing about this is it's across the board. It's for everybody in the community.
There's no carve-out for Arlington and Fort Worth.
No carve-out. In
No,
terms of
there's-
funding?
The answer to that is no.
No.
They're
It's
part
a
of the county.
county-wide
It's a
effort.
county-wide effort, yes.
And as far as the data collection, I know that earlier, well, I guess it's really last fall, we looked at the Network of Care, a Trilogy-type program, and I think they have got a public health component that talks about data collections and evaluation-type process that has been added since we met with them on that. I might ask you that, to check and see if that would be at all helpful in collection of data, and if so, you and I talk a little bit about that and see if we can, see how we might move forward on something along those lines.
right.
It is a new component that they've just added in the last month, and it's supposed to be specifically for public health.
That's good to hear.
And I believe in gathering information, but that's something to
We'll look into that. I will add this is highly competitive. As you all know, chronic diseases are the leading cause of death and disability in our country and in our community, and has been woefully underfunded, under-resourced over the years. This is a huge opportunity, but everybody is wanting to avail themselves of it. When I was at the Big Cities meeting last week, everybody there was applying, and that wasn't everybody.
Move approval to submit a grant application.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beecham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If I could indulge the court just a moment, I have Councilman Scarth and I were neighbors for years and years in Keller. I have a good story about he and his wife concerning TCU, if I can indulge you just for a minute.
Sure.
We lived in...
Do you approve of that?
He's got his purple tie on today, so, I mean, you know, he's got to be a...
Considering the state of TCU football, it's all right with us.
Back in the old, we were neighbors for years and years, and our houses were back to back in Keller, and we had a bar ditch, and we built a bridge so we would have ingress and egress to each other's properties. And back in the old Southwest Conference days, when TC and Arkansas,
I'm sorry about that. Did the county put in a culvert for that?
no,
I just want to kind of check this out.
it's still there like it was, I believe. We finally had to move because they were such wild neighbors, but that's not true. But we built a bridge, and back in the old Southwest Conference days, in Arkansas and Texas, Arkansas and TCU played. We had rhetoric back and forth across the fence. And I'm pretty much of an early riser. And I got up that Saturday morning when they played, and heard some noises, had the back door closed, screen doors open. Sound travels in cold weather a little bit better. And I thought I could detect somebody in the backyard. So I walked with my coffee cup to the door, and we had spotlights pointing across the bar ditch to the backyard. And about the time I saw this figure head back across the bridge and across the ditch, I flipped the spotlights on, and it was Danny's wife, Lucretia. She'd put some TCU spirit item in my backyard. And the only thing I'll say is she ran about a 4740 to their back door. But he was an excellent neighbor, an excellent councilman, as you all know, but thank you for letting me share that with you. Excellent neighbors. We do have 3 items of business for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for our bid number 2009-154. It's a bid for grading and storm drain improvements for the Northeast Annex JPS Health Center. Recommendation is toward the low bidder, Ed A. Wilson, the amount of $97,745. This is approved. We're also seeking contract approval and acceptance of the payment and the performance bond.
Move approval for the contract, acceptance of the payment bond, and acceptance of the performance bond.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 2 is also a bid award recommendation for our bid number 2010-007. This is our annual contract for paper and plaster products. A recommendation will be to award on a per unit price basis to the 7 vendors as shown in your court communique. Items 27, 28, 31, and 32 are all for plastic bags. We would ask that those be rejected and ask that we be allowed to rebid those with revised specifications.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Last item is also a bid award recommendation for bid number 2010-012. This is our annual contract for dishwashing and laundry chemicals. Our recommendation would be to award on a per unit price basis, awarding the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Could I see you for just a minute after this meeting? Thank you.
Ms. Lamb.
Thank you, Judge. I'm here today to request that Commissioners Court approve the formation of a Board of the Building Line Adjustment and also that the court appoint 5 members. Last week, I briefed the court on the need for this board and at that time recommended that the court establish a Board of Building Line Adjustment comprised of 5 persons with 1 appointment per committee member. The board would convene on an as-needed basis with Transportation Services serving as support for that group. Any action of the board would then be reported to Commissioners Court as a receive and file action.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move approval. I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And the second part of this is the appointment of those 5 members by the court.
Well, let me tell you, we have 2 pending properties that are for sale that have a slight variation that you're familiar with.
Yes, sir.
And it's very important that we get this board established and working as soon as possible. I was just handed a note from Mr. Manius that Gary Fickus wants to appoint Lou Hillman, 203 East Northwest Highway, Grapevine, to that board. Are we legal to do that today?
We can move right into appointments right now and just get each one of us if we'd like to.
I'll hold on then, because I have one also.
And I guess we did vote on that, so we're fixing to make your appointments in just a minute. We'll get to that. I guess the one other thing before we get there, Commissioner Johnson, you have some interlocal agreements on the...
Item 9M1, A, B, C, and D, I would move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We're now to appointments. As Commissioner Johnson indicated, Commissioner Fickus has requested that Lou Hillman be appointed to this board. I am going to recommend that Jane Sanford be appointed to the board.
And I'm going to recommend Randy Skinner.
And I will appoint Crystal James.
I have City of Fort Worth appointment, by the way, but Kevin Hansen has volunteered his services to serve on this board, and I have his resume. Very impressive.
Okay, so we have 5. Each one of us have our recommendations.
My motion is for all 5.
All 5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Excuse me. You need to designate 2 of the members for 1-year terms and the other 3 for 2-year terms.
Then what I will do is I will designate Crystal and Lou for the 1-year terms and the other 3 individuals for 2-year terms. If that's all right with everyone.
That's fine. I'll pass out my resumes.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you, are there any other appointments? You have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Mays.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have several items for the court this morning. The first concerns proposed amendments to the forward TIF zone number 9, which is the Trinity River Vision TIF. Ms. McMillan is going to initially lay this out, and we have several speakers.
Judge, Commissioners, just as a recap, in February of 2007, the Commissioners Court approved county participation in the Trinity River Vision TIF, contributing 80% of its tax increment generated from the zone for a period of 20 years for the purpose of funding approximately $115.9 million worth of public improvements. And the total project cost of the Trinity River Vision Central City project at the time were anticipated to be approximately $435 million, and about half of that funding was expected to come from federal sources. Today, we have representatives from the City of Fort Worth here to address the court regarding the proposed expansion to TIF 9, the Trinity River Vision TIF boundaries, and the proposed amendments to the project and financing plans for the zone. Mark Rauscher, the Senior Assistant to the City Manager, will make the formal presentation, and first I'd like to introduce Councilman Danny Scarth to address the court.
Thank you and good morning. I will say that the lights coming on behind Jack's house was accompanied by a loud, "Sweet pigs!" So I will say my wife was pretty well startled. Coming before you, the presentation, you'll remember that the United States Army Corps of Engineers recommended that we expand the project into Gateway Park couple of years ago in order to accommodate all of the flood control that was necessary, the valley storage. And so the now unified Central City project includes almost 1,000 acres in Gateway Park that does extend, Mr. Mays, now into District 4 in the city of Fort Worth. But in accordance with that, the state legislature passed some legislation that gives us the opportunity to expand the TIF as well. And so we think it makes sense to expand that TIF to include all the area that is in the Central City project, which is the reason we want to expand the boundaries. And then obviously those dollars, those 2005 dollars that we were originally using have now been very conservatively estimated as 2021 dollars, which is the reason beyond including Gateway Park, also why the funding level required has gone up to about $900 million. So also included in this is the concept of expanding the TIF from 20 years to 40 years to be sure that we have all of the financing covered within the life of the TIF. So this really does, expanding the project into Gateway Park, making that whole Central City project that much larger, does touch so many more citizens of Tarrant County and Fort Worth because of the increased amenities and benefits, I think, to the entire county. So we're looking forward to your consideration of this. And Mark Rauscher now, and we also have Jay Chapa is from our Housing and Economic Development Department. I think I saw J.D. Granger. So probably if there are any questions, we can get them answered for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming out, man.
GK, the mic. Here you go.
Welcome, sir.
All right. Thank you, Judge Whitley. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
All right. Well, as you've already heard this morning, we're here today to just provide you an update on the overall Trinity River Vision project, the new cost estimates, and the resulting financing plan. Essentially, today's presentation will just start out with a little bit of a history on the events surrounding the TIF district itself. I'll then review some of the initial project and financing plan numbers that I'm sure you'll recall. I'll then get into some of the economic impacts that were initiated as a result of different studies on the project, and then I'll jump into the meat of today's presentation, which is to again cover the updated project cost estimates and then give you an idea of how that project will be financed and how we can do that by utilizing the TIF district. And then I'll wrap that up with some staff recommendations and next steps. Back in 2003, late 2003, the City Council established TIF 9, or the Trinity River Vision TIF. In January 2006, Council actually approved the recommended TIF plan at the time. And in the summer of 2007, the TIF board was approached for funding to conduct an engineering study to take a holistic view of the project itself and update some of the cost estimates. That study was actually completed this past summer. As Councilmember Scarth alluded to, this summer the state legislature also enabled TIF districts to be extended in their terms. And this past September, based upon that updated engineering study, the project and financing plans for the TIF were updated, and that's what I'll share with you today. Now, in terms of the original $435 million project that Ms. McMillan alluded to, this is just a graphic illustrating the different infrastructure pieces that make up this project. Those pieces are generally the same today as they were back then. That includes the bypass channel that runs adjacent to the Fort Worth and Western rail line. That includes the 3 new bridges at Henderson, White Settlement, and North Main Street. And that also includes the inland water feature that I'm sure you're familiar with from other exhibits, as well as associated dams and gate elements that help to control the water elevation. Now, again, the project initially was pegged at a cost of about $435 million. Those numbers are based upon 2005 construction costs. The project, as Ms. McMillan mentioned, was actually projected to be a 50-50 cost split between the different local partners and the federal government. You can see the actual shares for the City of Fort Worth, Tarrant County, and the Tarrant Regional Water District. Those equate to about $102 million, which meant that the TIF district was going to cover the remainder of the local portion, which again was about $115 million. This assumed a 80% participation rate, which is pretty customary for most of our TIF districts. Now, back in 2005, I believe it was, the University of North Texas was commissioned to undertake a study to look at some of the economic impacts associated with the Trinity River Vision project, and in particular the Central City piece, known as Trinity Uptown. What that study indicated is that this project will generate about 6,000 construction jobs, nearly 12,000 permanent jobs, many new households for the Central City, a little over $500 million in tax revenue for the Fort Worth ISD. That was assuming a 25-year term. And then just under $50 million in tax revenue to the various participating entities, including the City of Fort Worth, Tarrant County College, Tarrant County, the Hospital District, as well as the Water District. The economic study had assumed that upon build-out over a 40-year period, that nearly 14 million square feet of buildable space would be created. This was residential, this was commercial, this was new office space. That would add about $1.6 billion in taxable value for the area. If you took a little bit shorter outlook on that and just assumed a 25-year build-out, those numbers were a little bit less, but still pretty significant, at just under 12 million square feet of buildable space and about $1.24 billion in value. Again, these numbers are all based upon 2005 construction costs. Now, for the primary reason why we're here today, I'm going to get into the proposal to expand and extend the TIF district. A lot of this is really stemming from that engineering study that I talked about earlier. Again, this past summer, that engineering study was completed. Freese & Nichols was the firm that was selected to undertake that effort. And as Councilmember Scarth alluded to earlier, with the addition of Gateway Park and the Riverside-Oxbow area to the project, as well as the need to take into account inflationary costs, Freese & Nichols came out with a new cost estimate of $909 million. This estimate also was able to take into account a lot of the new information that had been gleaned over the last couple of years as a result of ongoing design work and engineering studies. You see that total project cost here, along with the various elements that make up that cost. You can see a big bulk of that is related to land acquisition and demolition costs. We've also got costs associated with valley storage projects, the new bridges, the bypass channel, and so forth.
What percentage of the increased cost is occasioned by the expansion of the project, and what percentage is inflation?
The inflation, again, the project cost estimate was brought up to $2,021. I don't have the exact dollar figure for the amount of inflation that resulted in. I'll be happy to get that for you. But as far as the addition of Gateway Park, it was pretty significant. I don't have the exact dollar figure on me for that piece.
A lot is being made in the various public venues about this increase in cost. And it seems to me that quite the largest portion of it is due to the expansion and the scope of the project. Are you not in a position to give us numbers on that?
I don't have the exact dollar figure on me today. I'll be happy to get that as soon as I get back to the office and provide that with you. I've got a number in the back of my mind, but I'm hesitant to give that out.
Commissioner, I would say that you're absolutely right on that. I think when we first took the $435 million number, that was 2005 numbers. Right. What you see here is a projection going up to the value of the project in 2021 dollars. Right. Also, we might also remember that there was roughly a 20% contingency on this project. As those costs went up, that contingency number also went up. So while there was some increased cost as related to the first number, the substantial amount of this was for the expansion of the scope of the project itself, plus the inflationary issues.
I'm just a little concerned that we would get this presentation without the numbers needed to document the case in the first place.
The Gateway Park piece, it's in the, I believe it's in the $100 million range for that piece alone. There are also some optional project costs that I'd like to provide you with today on this exhibit. You can see the third item down below. There's about $30 million in optional project costs that have been set aside for future recreational enhancements to the Gateway Park portion that's east of Beach Street and just west of Oakland Boulevard. The part of the Gateway Park that's included in the baseline cost that you see here includes all those elements that are west of Beach Street. So it not only includes all the dirt work, but it also includes all the brand new recreational amenities, including the soccer fields, the basketball courts, the splash park, and so forth. So all of those elements are included within the total project cost, but it's just those items that are east of Beach Street that could be considered for future funding as an optional project, should those funds materialize.
The 909 basically includes the bypass channel, the Gateway Park,
west of Beach.
West of Beach.
Correct.
And then I guess the inflation added part. But you're right, Commissioner Brooks. The Gateway Park part of that deal, I was really thinking it was a little bit more than $100 million, but I'm not sure about exactly where that.
We have those numbers. Sandy Sweeney, who is the CFO of the Water District and also the TRVA board, is here, and she'll be able to provide those numbers to you as soon as this presentation is over. We'll make it part of the end part of this presentation.
Okay.
I would like to add that with Gateway Park, a lot of the costs that are part of that are due to the valley storage type projects. Those areas that we create additional flood storage to help enable the Central City project to be able to function properly. So it includes those efforts as well as some of the dirt filling operations that will need to occur in order to help implement some of the recreational improvements later on. So all those different pieces are included within the Gateway Park element. So as I touched on a moment ago, there are 4 optional projects that have been identified that could be considered at a later date depending upon funding availability. You see those 4 here, including the additional Gateway Park piece. All 4 of these projects equate to just under $120 million. So again, the idea here would be that should future funding opportunities present themselves, whether it be through the TIF district or maybe through future grant opportunities, that should the partners decide to move forward, they could, as a group, move ahead with one or all of these optional projects that you see before you. Of course, if any of these were to be funded through the TIF district, the TIF board would have to approve that before we could move forward with that amendment. A big reason why we're here today is to provide you with a proposal to expand the boundaries of the TIF district. You can see on this map the area in red. That's the existing TIF as it's known today. The expanded portion is the area highlighted in green. For purposes of differentiating between the two, we've referred to the red portion as TIF 9A. Again, that's the existing TIF. And then the new piece we're calling TIF 9B, which is essentially the Gateway Park and Riverside Oxbow pieces. This slide just gives you a little bit more detail as far as the actual boundaries of the TIF district. The expanded area accounts for about 2,600 acres of property. As you saw in the last exhibit, the new area stretches from the existing TIF eastern edge to the Oakland Boulevard and East First Street intersection area. This includes not only the Gateway Park area, but also Riverside Park, just northeast of downtown. Some of the goals associated with adding this portion to the TIF district include the ability to provide for enhanced flood protection and valley storage, as I mentioned earlier. Also to be able to move forward with the various recreational amenities in Gateway Park and Riverside Park areas. This will enable us actually to be able to program a 1,000-acre urban park just east of downtown Fort Worth. So that's real monumental when you consider that the Central Park in New York is about 850 acres or so. This would also enable us to move forward with some future transportation improvements. For example, some of the improvements that are slated for the East First Street corridor. Also, we believe this will enable some redevelopment and new economic development opportunities, not only within TIF 9B, but also some of the surrounding areas and neighborhoods. And then I think most importantly, this addition of property to the TIF will also enable us to be able to provide some connectivity between neighborhoods in East Fort Worth and Southeast Fort Worth to the Trinity Trails. Now today we're providing you again with an updated financing plan that not only includes an expanded TIF boundary, but also looks at extending the life of the TIF. You've heard the idea of going from a 25 to a 40-year TIF. It could be that we don't even need the full 40 years. Some estimates have shown that it will only take about 36 years in order to fulfill all of the obligations that would be required. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there as far as whether or not we'd need the full 40, but current estimates are that it would be about 36 years. We would continue the 80% participation level. We would allow what we're calling forward funding agreements from partner agencies. For example, I'm sure you're well aware of the water district's offer to provide an upfront funding agreement to help jumpstart the project and keep momentum moving. As a result of that agreement, the TIF district would actually repay the water district interest-free for the amount of that loan. The proposal would also be to ensure that there are no negative impacts on local funding commitments that have already been made from the various partner agencies with regard to their CIPs, their capital improvement programs, and their general fund ledgers. Now, in order to help generate projections on the amount of TIF revenue that would be available, two studies were actually completed, one by Gideon Toll and then the other by TXP, a firm known as TXP. Both studies assumed a baseline scenario of 25 years, and then they also looked at an extended length of time being 40 years. The Gideon Toll study was actually done a couple years ago. That study was done during the height of the economic boom, so when you look at these numbers, you can see that the Gideon Toll projections are significantly higher than what TXP developed. Again, a lot of that is because of the time frame when that study was done and the assumptions that were used based on a lot of the growth that was occurring at that time. Gideon Toll's study also took a very localized perspective of the development potential of the different parcels of land within the TIF district itself. Whereas with TXP, their perspective was a little bit more general in the sense that they looked at historical growth trends for not only the TIF district area, but also the city of Fort Worth and Tarrant County as a whole. They also assumed a 3-year lag in development activity given the current economic climate that it appears that we're pulling ourselves out of now. So in large part, that's why their projections are significantly lower than Gideon Toll. A big reason why TXP was actually brought on board is that they're an outside firm from Austin, and the project partners felt like it was a good idea to bring in an independent review of the potential of the TIF district. Because of the conservative nature of TXP's approach, Staff recommends that their numbers are what we move forward with, especially given the uncertainty of today's economic climate. Now, as you have been told already, the total project cost is about $909 million. This is how the funding breakdown occurs. You can still see that the federal partners, we're relying upon them quite heavily. The funding split has actually come into our favor a little bit. You've got almost a 54% federal split versus a 46% local split. You can see that the local partners' shares remain the same at $102 million, and the difference then for the local share that would need to be financed from the TIF is about $320 million. You'll recall, based upon TXP's calculations, that their estimate for 40-year TIF was about $440 million. So assuming that holds, you would end up with about $120 million in excess revenue that could be utilized, for example, to launch some of those optional projects that I showed a little bit earlier. As far as staff recommendations, again, we're recommending expansion of the TIF boundary to include those areas north and east of the existing TIF along the Trinity River. We're asking that $320 million from the TIF district be provided to help cover approximately one-third of the total project cost. We're proposing that the life of the TIF be extended up to 40 years. Again, that could be less than that if obligations are met sooner, as some calculations have shown. And again, as I mentioned before, any alternative projects that could be brought forward in the future would be dependent upon the availability of future funding opportunities. I would like to let you know that back in September, on the 25th, the TIF board actually endorsed this proposal and asked staff to go ahead and bring it forward to the various taxing entities and then back to the TIF board in December along with the City Council. You can see that on these next steps before you. December 4th is when the TIF board would be reconvened to approve any amendments to the plan. City Council on December 8th would then be asked to consider any changes to the TIF district project and financing plan. And then on December 18th is when we're projecting that the TIF board would meet to consider that forward funding agreement with the Tarrant Regional Water District for that upfront loan that is in the neighborhood of $226 million. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have this morning.
Before we get into questions, we might come back and answer the question that Commissioner Brooks, you had originally raised, and I think Judge Willey, you also did. So Sandy Sweeney is the Chief Financial Officer for the Water District. She also serves as the Chief Financial Officer for the Trinity River Vision Authority, and I believe she has answers to your questions.
Commissioner Brooks, I think your original question was the change from the 435 to the 909. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In round numbers, approximately $100 million was added related to Gateway. The majority of that is related to the valley storage and the dirt digging that has to be done in that area. The rest of it is somewhat related to some of the recreation. I think about $10 million is for recreation, and then there's some other infrastructure type items with just in large dollars. The inflation that was added is approximately $140 million, which there was no inflation in the $435 million estimate. When we changed our estimates for land and what they call LERDs, it's land and demo and utility relocations, that added another $150 million to the project cost. And then the final thing that we added was approximately $30 million, and that was for the bypass betterments. That has to do with the treatment and the look of the actual bypass itself, the hard walls, and what that would look like when it was finished. That all adds up to a little over between $400 and $500 million in round numbers. I can get more specific dollars for you, but that is approximately that change from the 435 to the 909. The inflation factor that was used is 4.5% inflation through midpoint of construction of each of the projects. That's not to say 4.5 through the whole term of the project. We've looked at each project as it's being built, and we escalate it to the middle of each of that project's construction, so it stops when it hits that midpoint. I'm not sure if there was any other specific questions, but I'll be glad to answer anything else I can.
You know, I guess the comments that I would make are, with regards to the presentation, are twofold. Historically, there have been certain things that, and I'm not saying that this carries forward or whatever, I'm just saying that historically, we have not looked to pay for government, for city buildings or parks within, you know, as far as the county contributing toward those. So a lot of times, we might take the total amount that a city would bring us, back out those portions of the total amount that represent what we consider individual or private or city project type stuff, and then count our participation based upon that. And I would fully expect to, at least from my standpoint, argue the same point as we approach this one, because I think there are some stuff in the Gateway project that might, you know, that would be considered park type deal. And I've heard you know, it's a regional park and it's a park that everybody's going to use. But I'll tell you, I'd get the same argument from South Lake or Keller or Colleyville or Arlington or anybody else if we start down that road. The other thing, that while I appreciate the fact that, you know, that the TIF board will make suggestions as far as alternatives in the future, the other thing that we have done is, once we've calculated that total amount, then we look at our percentage of participation based upon those dollars and the carry on those dollars, and come up with what we would consider a cap on the dollar amount that we contribute. That way, if later on the TIF board, of which we're a member, but a small member as far as percentage goes, decides that they want to go off and do other things, we're not obligated to participate. You can come back to us and you can ask us, and we can agree to participate, but by capping our dollar, then we maintain our ability to make a decision on future improvements or future additions to the TIF. And so, you know, one of the things that I would probably argue for as we move forward would be that same type of a thing, a dollar ceiling on where our contribution. So, yeah, the TIF may last for 40 years, but if we've paid our part after 25 or after 30, then that's when we drop out, unless you come back and make you know, an argument that we agree with that says we need to stay in for a longer period of time as a result of something that's happened, whether it be additional inflation, additional costs, or the addition of a project that we all think is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're definitely willing to put that in. So, you know, I just say that to you right now because Ms. McMillan has heard me say that and do that when several of the cities out in the Northeast area asked me to do it when I was commissioner. So I've made that statement to both the Trinity River folks and to other folks, and I want to put that on the record as something that we'd probably, at least from my perspective, that's what I would suggest, and each one of these folks up here have an opinion of their own, and sometimes two.
Okay. All right. Understood.
Your Honor, that's how we were going to structure those documents. You might also remember that there were some potential add-ons, other projects. We were going to structure so that if there was an interest in moving forward with those, that they would have to come back to each of the governmental entities, including the Commissioner's Court, for approval before we would move forward on those.
So the 909 figure does not include the additional proposal at all?
Not the $118 million piece of it. The only thing that we added from the original plan was the what Sandy referred to as the hard surface improvements. And the reason that we did that was simply because I think it was everybody's understanding that when we went into this project that those areas around the river that pedestrians were going to utilize, there was certain landscaping and different amenities that would be there initially. And when the Corps of Engineers looked at that project, they basically thought just straight up concrete walls. And we were going to make sure that that after doing all these different things, that the citizens were going to be able to have a nice area to go down to on the river.
And let me kind of push that a little bit further out. What we're talking about, you know, we're building the bypass channel as is what we're talking about. Those enhancements would only occur to the bypass channel, because we had to make the decision, I think as the channel goes forward, and as the vision builds that channel, if we don't do the enhancements at that point in time, they won't get done. And I believe that in all the pictures that we've seen that have talked about this vision, they're all done with those enhancements there.
Absolutely.
And I think anything less than that would be misleading to the public, because they'd get to the end and they'd say, wait a minute, you showed trees and walkways and stairs up, and now all I got is a concrete wall that I can't scale to get up to the top.
Right.
So, and I believe that was about between 29 and $30 million of additional funds from that.
That's correct.
But that doesn't include any of the other canals, or really, I don't believe it really includes much work to the actual river after the bypass, the other part of the river that we're bypassing with the channel.
That's correct.
That's right.
Commissioners, over the next few weeks, if you have any other comments or suggestions, we are going to be negotiating with the city on drafting an amendment agreement. So I welcome any comments, suggestions on some of the items that you have concerns about, or how you would like to see us structure this amendment. One thing I will say, I think the $20 million that they put in there for the building, which would have to come for the police fire, was put in there because they will be losing their police fire building right now. That will be taking up with the addition of the water features.
We need that current property for the channel itself. So that's not simply providing money for a new police department and fire training center. It's basically to compensate the city for the loss of that building.
It's relocation expense like we pay to anybody else whose land we took.
And again, that's going to be something that would only be funded later on if they came back to us, and it would be a second amendment to our agreement. Any of those project costs that were additional costs would have to come back, and we will make sure that our amendment is structured so that all of those costs, projects, have to come back to the Commissioner's Court for approval. So just let me know if you have any other items that you would like to see in that, and we'll be working with the city over the next few weeks to get that agreement done. Thank you.
I guess the one question I'm going to have about what you just said is, if it's a relocation cost, then it ought to be paid for as a relocation cost as we're taking it, because that's what happens. So why is that $20 million as an alternative?
We're still in discussions on that particular issue at this time. Judge, we basically view it the same way. If we're going to take the city's property, especially that significant piece of property, then we're probably going to recommend that we go ahead and acquire that now through the process, rather than asking the city to simply give us that piece of property. But those discussions are going on right now.
And I guess the other thing that I would say and comment with regards to that is that just as in any relocation we would do, we would relocate and build back to existing deal, and to the extent that the city wanted to expand that and make it a much larger and or a much nicer type of facility, that's what I would consider to be the extra. And if that's what the $20 million is, then I would consider it to be an alternative, and we just need to look at that as you're going through that.
We are looking at that at this time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Mark. Danny?
J.D., would you stick around a minute?
Thank all of y'all for the presentation.
We're ready to move on then to our second item. This concerns a presentation from Texas AgriLife Extension. It relates to the pesticide application training program. Mr. Johnson is here to address the court at this time.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Being an Aggie, we don't have a football team to brag on this morning, but maybe we will pretty soon. This morning,
I've been rebuilding for about 10 years now.
yeah, I realize that. This morning, I just wanted to take a few minutes to brief the court on the pesticide applicator training and recertification program that we work with out of our department. The primary group that we work with as far as training is the applicators who want to hold a Texas Department of Agriculture license, which would be commercial applicators, those who are actually in the business of applying products on large open spaces. And then we also work with non-commercial political subdivision licensees, which would be those individuals like county employees, municipal employees, school district employees, and then others employed by governmental agencies. Then the third group that we work with pretty closely is the private applicator group, which are the ag producers who are producing ag commodities on privately controlled property. So there's three primary groups that we work with, but there's actually just two licensing groups. The commercial, non-commercial license is one specific group, and then the private applicators, as the name implies, would just be those individuals applying on their property. What's unique about the program is the private applicators have a mandatory requirement for training. They must attend a formalized training that's mandated by the state legislature that comes through Texas AgriLife. Tarrant County is one of the few and unique in the state where we actually provide individual training. Most of the counties in the state require that they get 20 to 30 individuals together, then do a training and a testing at one time. Here in Tarrant County, we have the luxury of having a room and video equipment dedicated to someone who would want to come in and be trained and then go test for their license. They would have the opportunity to come in individually, go through the training process. We would verify that they've been trained, and then they could go to a TDA office, Texas Department of Agriculture office, which is the closest one to us is in Dallas, and actually do the testing over there. We had an individual yesterday that came in and was trained, so he could apply restricted use pesticides on his property. There's a video and a study guide that's been developed by our ag chemical section at Texas A&M University that we use with the private applicators. Now, for commercial and non-commercial applicators, there's no training requirement. An individual could just go forward and take the test. They do have to pass a rigorous test, but there's no training requirement. A number of years ago, our office developed some study guides for individuals that would like to be trained and get a commercial or non-commercial license. So we have those available. We did a brief training for a group and videotaped that, so now we also have it on CD where someone could take it home, take the study guides home, watch the videos if they wanted to, and at least have a step up on taking the test. So instead of just going cold into the testing procedure to get a commercial or a non-commercial license, at least we would have provided them some background information that they could use to test. And the areas that we've developed study guides in are the general area and laws and regulations, and those are the two mandatory testing categories that they have to take to be eligible to get a license. And then we've also developed study guides for right-of-way control and aquatic animal control, which was primarily for our Tarrant County employees who were trying to get licensed. Those were the two categories that they were needing. For pesticide applicator training, what we do throughout the year, we usually run about 60 private applicators in a year's time. Both through, we do one group training for the TCU Ranch Management Program, where we'll get a group of individuals, train them in the morning. We have a reciprocal agreement with Texas Department of Agriculture, and they come in and test them in the afternoon. And then the other bulk of that 60 are the individuals that we do over the year's time. They get training in laws and regulations, the IPM, Integrated Pest Management, pest damage, the identification and control. We teach them how to read labels and labeling, which is very important. Pesticide safety, both from a mixing, transport, and handling standpoint. Pesticide poisoning symptoms. So if someone's beginning to show symptoms of pesticide poisoning, they can recognize that immediately. We also give them training in personal protective equipment. That starts with long pants, gloves, hat, those type of things. We also do training in groundwater protection for private applicators. There's an endangered species section where they have to be able to identify endangered species. And then important things, equipment calibration. If their equipment's not functioning properly, then they're going to be putting out too much, too little, and that can have some dire consequences, mainly on the environment, but also some economic consequences associated with that. So that's the training portion of what we do for private applicators and then the commercial, non-commercial applicators. As far as continuing education is concerned, once they get a license, the state legislature has mandated if they're a commercial applicator, they have to get so many CEUs a year. If they're a private applicator, they have to receive X number of CEUs over a 5-year period. The groups that we work with to provide continuing education to their licensees is Texas Department of Agriculture. That's our primary group that we work with, and we provide CEUs in general categories, laws and regulations, and then also integrated pest management. Then we also work with the Structural Pest Control Service, which is now under the umbrella of Texas Department of Agriculture. That pest control are the ones that actually can come into a structure and apply pesticides. So we work providing CEUs in the general categories, laws and regulations, the integrated pest management, and then the weed category. And then occasionally we provide some CEUs for those licensees who hold a Texas Department of Health license for vector control, both rodents and mosquitoes. And we rely pretty heavily on some of our specialist staff to do that training for us. Continuing education, as I alluded to earlier, recertification. Commercial and non-commercial applicators have to get 5 hours of credits annually to be able to renew their license, and then the private applicators have to receive 15 credits over a 5-year period. And they will we don't only provide CEUs just so they get the check mark of getting their continuing education out of the way, but we want to be sure that they're personally protected. We give them information where they can increase their subject matter expertise in the area that they're applying pesticides in. We want to try to decrease pesticide usage where possible. There's economic benefit thresholds that we discuss with the applicators. Something that's becoming more important is protecting the environment, primarily our water resources. We've had instances where we've had contamination from runoff with various pesticides, so we discuss how we can mitigate that damage and try not to pollute our water resources. And then we also encourage cultural practices, mowing, weeding, doing some hand tasks that would alleviate the use for pesticides. And then there's also an economic benefit to reduce pesticide use in the environment. Continuing education, we usually reach at least 250 applicators annually here in Tarrant County. We provide in excess of 15 hours of CEUs over the course of a period of a year. We have 3 large classes that we hold that are 5 hours each. We provide one in November. Actually, it's tomorrow. We have another one in February, and then we also do one in December. But we will cover topics such as laws and regulations, the equipment calibration, and the list continues down through minimizing spray drift, record keeping, and then any new products or techniques that have arisen. We have to apply for and receive approval from the Texas Department of Agriculture on any of the 5-hour courses that we offer. They look at our agenda and our presenters to ensure that they meet the standards that the legislature requires, and they approve our course, and then we're able to provide that to the applicators within Tarrant County. As I mentioned earlier, tomorrow we're having a course out at the Resource Connection at 2300 Circle Drive in the gym. We have I believe we have 100 plus applicators who are coming to receive information on, we've got 5 topics, so we've got 5 hours of instruction there. We're going to cover nematodes. We will also cover fire ants tomorrow.
It's not anything like a horny toad, is it?
No, no. No, we're trying not to control them. We're trying to protect them. We've got a specialist coming in that's going to talk about a new biological control for fire ants that's being tested right now. We've got a representative from the Texas Department of Agriculture that's going to present an update on the laws and regulations. And we have a turf grass specialist from at our Dallas Research and Extension Center who's going to talk about turf grass management, weed control primarily. And then we have an extension plant pathologist coming from College Station who's going to talk about disease identification and control. So I'd like to invite the court tomorrow if y'all want to come out. We'll be going from about 8 to 4 at the gym at the Resource Connection. If you get there close to noon, we'll feed you if you come. So you can't beat chicken and beef fajitas by any means. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Ken. Members of the Court, we can go to item C. This is the update on the H1N1 influenza. Ms. Brewer is here to address the Court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Again.
I wanted to point out to you that the number of doses that we're aware of that have come into Tarrant County, of those doses, public doses that we've received, a little over 4,000, and private doses over 100,000. So we want to again remind people to check with their private provider or their clinic to see if they have any H1N1 doses available for them. We are still concentrating on the target populations. All of us are. We did give 1,212 doses of the nasal spray H1N1 to our first responder population this past week. Overall, in Tarrant County, we are seeing a downtrend in the number of H1N1 cases. This is certainly momentary good news. We will continue to watch it. When you have a viral situation like this, you expect there to be peaks and valleys. But compared to September and early October, we are seeing a downward trend both in our school absenteeism rate, and of those absentees, the number that are out with flu-like illness, and with our emergency department flu-like illnesses. However, we're hearing from our colleagues in other states that some of them are just now in their peak, and we are concerned about the holidays coming up and people going here, there, and everywhere, and probably going to a location that's in their peak and coming back into the community. So, of course, we will remain vigilant. I also want to remind the public that we still have seasonal flu vaccine in our clinics, and we would encourage you again to check with your private provider or our clinics as to the availability. And while we have not seen seasonal flu start in our community yet, we could see that start any time now. We're going into the average seasonal flu season, so again, we remind everybody to get their seasonal flu vaccine. And I'll try to answer any questions you have at this time.
Lou, would you might talk to the Court a little bit about what Tahoe is doing and the percentage of vaccines that we might be getting in the future compared to the overall distribution of vaccines?
I'll be glad to. As we all know, we've been concerned and puzzled as to how the vaccine has been coming out to our local areas. And I have been in an active conversation with the Texas Association of Local Health Officials, TALHO, and they in turn have been in an active conversation with the Department of State Health Services about this. And the agreement as of last week was that the distribution formula would be modified so that local health departments would begin receiving more vaccine. It would be on a per capita basis, and of the amount that they have total, 20% of the total amount would be coming out to the public health departments, and then based on per capita. We were hoping to see that start things moving again last weekend. That didn't happen, and so we're hopeful to see that movement start this week.
Lou, I have been very, very concerned about how vaccine is coming into this community. I think it is an abomination that our public health department has only received some 4,000 doses. I'm prepared to give it the rest of this week to see if the negotiations and the various things that people are doing to increase that vaccine flow in this community work. But a lot of people in this community depend upon the public health department for vaccination, for distribution of flu shots and that sort of thing. A lot of people don't have private providers. They depend upon the health department. And for us to not be able to serve our publics doesn't sit well with me. We'll talk.
Well, I'm very glad to hear you say that, Commissioner, because I couldn't agree with you more. And, what I said to GK yesterday was, if we don't see anything happening today, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
Do we have has JPS gotten anything more, or in the 4,000 that you're talking about, has JPS gotten additional vaccines? Do we know that?
I don't have that information for you right now, but I can find out for you.
I mean, it is, pretty unbelievable that we're getting less than 4% of the total vaccines that are being delivered to the county. And especially when you take into account that, as Commissioner Brooks said and indicated, many of those individuals who their health providers are coming either from the public health or from JPS and their clinics. So I would be very interested in knowing, of that 104,000, approximately how many are going to providers either at Cook's, at JPS, or public health, and how they're being distributed out from that standpoint. Because I know that we charge an administration fee. Again, the federal government paid. Do we even charge an administration fee?
We're not allowed to do that. However, I will also tell you the reason for that was because everything that we needed was supposed to come with it, and that is not the case either. The other week before we did the mass event, we had to really scurry around to find pediatric needles because they did not come with pediatric needles. And purchasing has really been, helping us to look for a source for the future. Fortunately, we had some in another clinic that we were able to swap out. But we're going to have to do some contract amending there because it's taking more money for us to buy the supplies that we were told we were going to have. And on the NACHO, National Association of County and City Health Officials Board conference call yesterday, other places were reporting the same thing.
I know that Oakland, California is having the same issues and in a worse percentage-wise than we are, so it seems very odd that it's not working.
When I heard the reports from across the country, you pardon a terrible pun, it was all over the map. It was just, some places are reporting we have more than we can use, but our counties right next door don't have enough.
Are the private providers and hospitals giving their vaccines away? The federal government paid for all of the vaccine manufacturing, it's my understanding.
At least those areas that we've checked with, there has been a charge for the shots, not the vaccine, but the process of giving the shot itself.
Well, the federal government is not giving the vaccine away.
I believe they are.
Well, we're receiving public health emergency preparedness funding that is supposed to cover that cost. So we've got that funding stream.
It was my understanding that all of the vaccine was being given at no charge, whether it be to a private provider, to a hospital, or to a public health agency. That from that point forward, if there was an administration fee or a fee for providing the injection, that might be something, but that's what I'm saying. I think everybody got the vaccine at no charge.
And then there's an administration fee for those that aren't getting funding for it.
We want to go back to something that we talked about, Lou and I talked about yesterday, and I've had conversations with Commissioner Brooks about this. Everybody focuses on the amount of dosages that public health gets, which is about 4,000 so far. We do have about 110,000 that have been distributed to private providers in the county. But people are coming to public health to get the shots, and we don't charge anything. We really don't need to make an appointment. We have scheduled hours, and we take a certain number of individuals. Talho being able to give us, or to work with the state to get us 20% is a big step for us. However, if we get to the point where we're not receiving vaccines, or there is a deviation from that percentage, then we're going to have to ask you all to step in and communicate with our state legislators and executive branch people to make sure that counties, through their public health departments, get an adequate amount of vaccines.
Sounds like vaccines, about 18,000 right now.
Yeah, vaccines that are usable vaccines. We talk about the nasal spray, but in a lot of areas, the nasal spray is not something that you can use in a compromised community.
The live vaccine as opposed to
absolutely. So it's not just the number that we get, but the right type of vaccine.
But we don't want the live vaccine. We want the other one. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, we would certainly prefer that. It doesn't have as many restrictions on it, and it allows us to distribute it
Well, and I think the other thing we want from the state is we want them to distribute the vaccines to us without restrictions, because they placed some pretty tight restrictions on those vaccines that they gave us.
Well, that was within the target populations. The plan all along was that we would eventually have enough vaccine in the community that we would have reached the target population, and then we could move on to the rest of the population. We are nowhere close to being able to do that.
So again, as I calculate, if there's been 110,000 delivered to Tarrant County, we should have gotten approximately 22,000. We've gotten 4, so they owe us about 18,000 before they start distributing back again to the providers. And if we don't have that pretty quick, pretty early this week, or if we don't start getting then we need to prepare letters to our legislators for our
I'm very glad to hear you say that.
And just parenthetically, I have checked with some private providers in my community, and none of them have either the H1N1 or the seasonal flu, though they've ordered both. So these 100,000 doses, I don't know where they're going.
And we still don't know who has them?
Well, I have a list, but there's nobody in my neighborhood on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other question. A vaccine that I've been asked about, oddly, 3 times in the past week is the Shingles Vaccine. Is that another one that we don't get very many of?
There's a huge demand for the vaccine, and we get a supply in, and it's gone. I mean, we have people calling all the time looking for it, and so as soon as we get a supply in, it's gone. It's in high demand.
Do we get allocated that, or is that just something we order?
That's something that we order.
Can we order more, or is it restricted too?
It's kind of that supply and demand thing where you have to be the availability from the manufacturer and just keeping it coming in.
Okay. Okay.
Again, that is another vaccine that private providers
And
are
it's
also...
over $300 at a private provider.
Yes.
And most of the senior citizens.
Yes.
What do we charge for it?
Thank you.
Yeah, the only place that I know anybody has been able to go is out to JD's place. Have you got Sway over there?
Do I what?
Do you have Sway over there?
Sure.
Swaying with the shingles.
Yeah, and then I live in this community that doesn't have any public transportation anywhere.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips, you going to come and tell us about that storage of paper you've got out there on the table?
Yes.
Those are for
Trees does
you.
that represent out there?
Those are for you.
They're not for me. They're just being transported over here for me to look at.
Well, I know.
Commissioner Brooks, they're all mesquite trees, so there was no damage done.
I see.
Okay.
Texas Mountain Laurels.
I guess our
No.
purchasing department takes care of that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here to give you an update on the new jail project included in the 2006 Capital Improvement Program. Let me follow up first with our last month's meeting. I wanted to give some information to Commissioner Fickus. He asked questions about the construction of the inmate cells. The floors are 4 3/4 inch thick poured-in-place concrete. The walls are 6-inch thick CMU, or concrete masonry unit blocks, filled with concrete mortar and reinforcement bar. And the ceilings are formed and poured in place 6-inch concrete. Now, Commissioner Johnson asked about the light fixtures. Bob Knowles and the rest of the project team have looked at the light fixture options. It looks like we'll be able to recess the light fixtures inside of the 6-inch concrete. We'll be building blocking out some leave-outs there and placing a frame, a heavy-duty frame in with security bars over the top of 2 light fixtures. And it's probably $500 additional cost for that for each particular cell.
But I'm sure it would cost that much to replace all the others.
Yes.
They're going to have, you'd have to replace them on a regular basis, huh?
We appreciate that input. Also, last month I mentioned that Gideon Toll provided the construction documents to us in September. They're still in review by my department, by the Sheriff's Department, City of Fort Worth, and Gilbane Building Company. To give you an idea of the mass and the size of these particular documents, we put a full set out here in the hall. That represents about over 400 pages of drawings, 1,800 pages of technical specifications. So it's quite a mass of documents. It took a village to put that together. There's many design professionals who have input on that, provided drawing sets, such as the civil engineers, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical engineers, the security system engineers, the jail interior design architect, the Texas Accessibility Standards consultant, the jail kitchen consultant, as well as the architect of record, Gideon Toll. So it took quite a few folks. It's important to have good coordination and continuity and consistency between those drawing sets, especially from the viewpoint of the bidders. That's why we asked Gilbane Building Company to do a interdisciplinary document coordination review, which is what you have in front of you now. Gilbane has about 7 folks in Phoenix, Arizona, who do nothing but review drawings all day. This is their deliverable. This is about 600 comments in about 68 pages. Essentially something that they found that they didn't find anything other than out of the ordinary. It's about the quantity and the type of comments they would expect for a project of this complexity and size. Gideon Toll and their design consultants are currently addressing these comments now. The main benefit of this type of detailed review is really not necessarily to deal with change orders. It's really to get good, hard, tight, competitive bids. The notion is, as the bidders go through the drawings and do their takeoffs of the material types, quantities, labor estimates and such, if they see consistency and a rhythm throughout these drawings, from drawing to drawing and set to set, they'll feel more comfortable with the drawings. They'll perceive as their risk is lower, and hopefully the goal would be to get better bids. And
But
we
they
think
should
we-
also prevent change orders where we talk about inconsistencies between one thing and another.
They should. They should.
Do you have any feel for what kind of progress the city of Fort Worth is making on this submission?
Yes, Commissioner, I do know they've made progress regarding the corrections center work. There's a fire alarm security replacement project that we're bidding concurrently with this project, and they have issued a building permit for that. Now, I don't know what percentage they're through with the new building. I do know my staff has been meeting with them on a weekly basis, along with the architects, and they've been very, very agreeable to get this deal done. You approved a communities facilities agreement today, which will help remove a hurdle to get the building permit, and I feel pretty confident the building permit will not be in the critical path of the project.
Good.
Last month, I informed the Commissioners Court that we thought we could bid the project in December. Well, I think it's January. I think we're going to have to give time to Gideon Toll to complete most of these comments, also give time for the Sheriff's Department and my department to complete the review. And when the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff and Bob Knowles sign off on the documents, we'll be sending those down to Texas Commission on Jail Standards. Hopefully we can maybe get it the last week of December, but most likely it's going to be January for the first bid advertisement.
How does that compare to when we originally planned on doing that, and how far behind?
Judge, we're in good shape. When we first negotiated the architectural contract with Gideon Toll, we did that in June of 2008, and it had 15 months of design effort in there, and that's without including any owner time for review. So the 15 months was up in September. And if we add a couple of months there for owner design review, and which happens, and we're pretty much right on it, really. We thought we could get a little acceleration out of it. We've kind of come back out of this here and kind of stepped back just a little bit to make sure everything's real clean. And we feel good about it. We think we'll be advertising in January. We'll have a guaranteed maximum price to you in March, and the project will take approximately 24 months to build.
Do we have the same type of review going on or plan to go on as we move to our civil courts building and our other projects? Is this by the other contractors that we have? I know Gilbane is not in the civil courts building, but this seems to be something that I would think would be very helpful.
It'd certainly be helpful on medical examiners. Thomas S. Byrne is in the process of doing their interdisciplinary review right now.
Okay.
So we'll ask for that in the civil courts when we go forward with that.
Who would be doing that?
That'll be the construction manager, their team, or they can actually outsource that. Gilbane outsources to others. I mean, they've got teams of folks in Arizona that do this, but I think Yates is large enough as well to do some of this work there on their own, as well as Thomas S. Byrne. Whether or not it'll be this detailed is yet to be seen. That's all I have on the jail today.
So if we want to go out there and look at all those 1,800 pages of stuff, we can do that?
Certainly, I'll leave them the rest of the week if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Now, I do have something on the historic courthouse if you got just a minute.
Please.
We
passed the 13-minute mark a few hours ago, so we've got some time.
We are in the process, about 75% complete with the construction documents for the 1895 courthouse clock tower historically sensitive rehabilitation project over here across the street.
Well, historically sensitive
rehabilitation project. So what we're faced with now, we're looking to, one of the problems we have at the building, that the tower leaks. Doesn't have a waterproofing membrane underneath the copper. However, when we finish, it will. And we've been looking at different options. The architect and our roofing consultant have looked at what we call a fiberglass reinforced plastic to put underneath that would adhere or fasten to the dome skeleton and would be covered by a membrane, then covered by the copper. However, I didn't have a good vision of looking up inside the tower and seeing a white piece of plastic sticking up in a 115-year-old building, so I asked him to go back and take another look at it, and here's the option: is stainless steel. This stainless steel would essentially be covering our skeleton of a dome up there. They would adhere this particular synthetic rubber material, and over the top of that, they would adhere to the copper. Now,
So
this
you're
has-
going to have to strip the copper off in order to
Yes,
do this?
yes. What the copper, you can see the copper, when you go up in the tower, it's got holes in it and cracks in it, and it's just, that's why the building's leaking. So we're going to take all the copper off, put a membrane, a waterproof membrane, essentially that would be okay even without the copper. So this will be underneath the copper.
So I'm trying to follow exactly what you're saying here. We're going to take all the copper off, and we're going to start off by putting this on, and this is going to be what we see on the inside. How many people have been up to the inside to see the inside of the 3, 4, 5? Is this a whole lot more expensive? Has this been a whole lot more expensive than that white stuff?
Oh, I certainly believe so.
Well, then, based upon the number of people who don't go up and look at the white inside that deal, I'd sure like to know what the cost of that white versus a stainless steel.
I'm going to agree with the judge. This is the inside of the tower?
The inside of the dome.
So this is we're going to put this on, we're going to adhere this to the copper. What are we going to adhere it to before we put the copper up there to adhere it to?
We're going to have to bolt, either one. It's going to have to be fastened to the skeleton, to the steel structure.
Okay.
Bolts, which it's not now. It's just right now the copper's held on by wire.
Oh, that's exciting. Is that kind of like that piece of 400-pound
That's
sheet
essentially,
metal that's
yeah.
held on by wire?
We're going to make it waterproof when we leave. The question is what material. So what I'm trying to do is let you know, looking at different options, we'll provide you. Once we figure out what skin we're going to put on it, we'll come back and get approval
It's
for
going to be
that.
copper and then probably something that's adhesive, and then it's just a matter of whether it's going to be stainless steel or white.
Or something different.
Something different.
Does that thing come in any other color but white?
I don't know that. I need to check. I'll check.
Spray paint?
Yeah, we could spray paint it before we put it up there.
If it's waterproof, it should last well.
It should.
That it should. So we'll be back in a couple of months, just letting you know where we're at on it. And I've also asked for a peer review. I've called in architects out of Dallas. They do a lot of courthouses in Texas and other parts of the nation to get their opinion on our roofing system. So it's somewhat of a unique project for me and others. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So
when it's all said and done, you're expecting that are we going to put new copper on that? Or is it, we're not trying to take and use any of that copper that's going on?
when the answer is yes, I plan on presenting new copper to you. Now, whether or not you want to put a patina on it to turn it green early, that's Commissioner's Court call. We could have it nice shiny copper and let it patina on its own, or we can chemically treat it, whatever you'd like to do. We're going to provide you with some options. I do know the Texas Historical Commission, when I met with those folks up in the tower back in August, you're
telling me you had the historical up in that tower on that ladder?
No, the Texas. Down from Austin.
Okay.
Up from Austin. No, none of those other folks.
Say Paul Wood, turn off your mic.
And they would like, of course, be able to reuse a lot of that material, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to reuse the material for the copper, because when we put our circumference of this particular waterproofing membrane, it probably won't fit anymore, number one. And number two, it's full of holes. So we're not suggesting that, but we may try to save a piece or two and put it in our 1895 room.
That'd be good.
We'll do that.
So I guess a couple of other questions. What you're bringing us, or what you will be bringing us, will be a remodeling, historically sensitive restoration from the top
That's correct.
down to the little parapet that goes around.
To the balustrade, bottom, the cast iron balustrade. It'll be the clock tower itself.
And with regards to that balustrade that goes around, some of those, are you going to be suggesting that we replace each one of those balusters, or just those ones that are damaged?
Judge, we'll be pulling off all of that cast iron material, all the balustrades, all the end boxes, all of the skin off the bottom there, taking it to whatever shop they take it to, treat it and repaint it to make it look like granite, and we'll put it back.
We're going to try to be a little bit closer to the granite that we got up there this time than what we were last.
The ones that are made from wood?
We're going to replace those. We're actually going to, part of the contract is to develop a mold to replace 2 or 3 of those balusters. There's 2 or 3 of them missing, and one of them is made out of wood.
Well, there's one upside down, but we want to keep that one.
Right.
Yeah, that's historic. While you're up there, you might as well replace the neon flag.
Oh, yeah, please.
There's certainly some holes left in the copper from where it
I don't know
was.
why the holes are there.
We did have, just as a point of interest, we did have the Verdon Clock Tower Company from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Here yesterday?
They come visited with us a couple of weeks ago. And the owner now, his grandfather was in a Star Telegram photo back in the 40s who did some upgrades on the clock himself. So, but now his grandson's back, and we're going to have him look at doing some work on the bell, because when the bell goes off, the floor vibrates, and that's really not a good thing in a masonry building. So,
I noticed the clock stopped a little while yesterday. It just get a little tired?
yeah, we're just doing a little taking care of it. It needs a little tender loving care, and we're going to see about doing some changes on it while we're up there working. All that clock face gets taken off, cleaned up. Some of it gets put back, some of it gets replaced. We'll be back in a couple of months on that. Thank you.
Members of the court, that's all we have at this time.
Commissioners Court will now recess from open session and proceed to closed session to discuss items exempted under sections 551, 1071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Having returned from the closed session, we will now do the following items.
On item 9D2, we would ask that the court approve the agreement in the Ashgrove case.
Move approval.
9B.
D as in dog,
C.
or as in district attorney. 2.
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
On item 9D3, we would ask the court to approve the resolution repealing Court Order 104-406 and adopting a new resolution regarding the purchase of cement.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is item D4 under the District Attorney's Office, requesting the refund of $10,449.31 to Alan Samuels Dodge Hyundai. We authorize this refund to be made from the general fund and authorize the county auditor to pay this amount without the necessity that it first appear on the claims register for approval by the court.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
That's all we have, Your Honor.
There being no further business, we will adjourn again in midway of those votes at 4:30. Well, it's a good close.
Did you get all your signatures in?
Yes, and I think the judge has the one that needs to be notarized.